direct, analytical. We approach the Quran as a chronological timeline of past events. However, verse 39:23 describes a book that is consistent and oft repeated. This internal repetition creates a self-referencing circuit that exists in the present, moving according to a different logic than linear time. This recurring structure functions as an eternal memory tesseract. It is the sealed, living tongue of the messenger, operating as an active topology that processes the reader's current coordinate rather than reporting on a distant past. Observing this structure as a timeline creates a state of systemic hallucination, what the text calls taguth. The observer becomes trapped in a false reference frame. Breaking this requires the application of aql, the systemic reasoning demanded by verse 10:100 to recognize patterns across the closed field. The universe does not operate on a sequence of past, present, and future. It functions on a closed topological loop. Every action, consequence, and physical law is written into a single recursive circuit, the Ouroboros print. Treating the text merely as history disables its internal logic, but treating it as a topology activates the living circuit. The circuit begins with its starting condition, before time and before the material universe. The system existed as a single unified consciousness, the nafs wahida, defined in verse 4:1. This singular origin fractured into a dual universe structure. Splitting the nafs into opposing vectors of fire and light generates the friction necessary for a testing environment. Into this turbulent space, the system introduces the amanat, the trust, outlined in verse 33:72. This is the package that the heavens, the earth, and the mountains refuse to carry. The human host enters this dual field for one mechanical purpose: to navigate the friction and maintain the integrity of the amanat, and carry it back to the zero reflection coordinate of home, established at verse 38:46. The text addresses the human soul through three distinct states of traversal. On the first lane is Tier 1, discipline, the Adam state sealed by the primordial oath. The middle lane triggers Tier 2, religion, the Ibrahim state, completed through sacrifice. The top lane resolves into Tier 3, amanat, the return container providing shelter and bypassing destruction. Spiritual progression requires the host to move through these three mechanical states to carry the trust. Movement through these tiers is driven by the internal law of universal closure. Verse 50:21 establishes that every node in the system arrives with two specific forces. This shows the internal physics of the soul. The zahiq, or driver, provides the momentum of action. The shahid, or witness, provides internal observation. Together, these vectors propel the host through a mechanical loop, moving through action, transformation, and return. Action is a trade, often ending in the regret described at 531. Transformation is a scaling bifurcation, where the system evaluates the node's alignment. The human slave is a self-contained singularity of the dual field. Housing both action and memory, the host answers only upward to the system's creator. The closed topology uses a disposal protocol to neutralize tagut, the centers of entropy attempting permanence. This matrix maps systemic outcomes, are baked permanently mute. Fourth, Pharaoh aims fire upward, but the system claims him with water. Ibrahim walks out of the fire living, while Pharaoh is pulled from the water dead. The same elements serve opposite mechanical functions, depending on the nature of the node. Verse 1092 states that Pharaoh's body is preserved mid-encompassment. It remains as a permanent mechanical sign for all future nodes in the system. False elevation cannot be sustained. The system neutralizes entropy, preserving only true nodes to continue. This brings us to the heartbeat of the universe, the single pulse. This waveform maps the physics. Verse 2118 installs the strike. Truth crushes falsehood on contact. Verse 2141 defines the return. Action loops back to encompass the sender. Finally, 57:4 defines the field. Entry, exit, ascent, and descent track as one simultaneous knowing. Historical figures are nodes traversing this single wave. Ibrahim pauses the fire. Idris ascends. Iblis is ejected, and Isa is raised. Musa compresses this entire physics lesson at verse 7:143. The mountain's collapse and his awakening occur in one breath, the systole and diastole of the pulse. The mechanics are constant. Separate events are just the system evaluating the pulse at different coordinates. The backward direction of the circuit is structurally closed. Ibrahim only struck the idols after they turned their backs. Turning away creates a structural vacuum. Shaitan inverts this exploit. When the reader looks back, they open that same vacuum within themselves, allowing entropy to flood the node. The past is silenced at verse 35:14. It cannot answer. When the ego looks back, it must fill that silence with decorated falsehoods or dismiss the truth as night tales. Backward traversal always executes as loss, followed by regret. Treating the text as history forces the host into a backward orientation, guaranteeing systemic failure. Backward flow is prevented by a mathematical lock, the 93-4 diode. This diode enforces the logic of the system. The future, or akira, holds a value of 1. The past, or ula, holds a value of 0. Backward travel is physically blocked by the coordinates 0 value. The system enforces this forward motion. Attempting to reverse the flow of the 57-4 pump does not alter the system, it tears the host apart. Moving safely through this pressure requires the pattern recognition of the ocul. Taking the forward grip of the book, commanded at 1912, aligns the host with the vector that terminates at the 0 reflection coordinate, the point defined at 3846 as home. The driver and the witness merge. The standing waves collapse. The tension disappears as all moving parts lock into the coordinate. The loop remains open and entropy threatens until the reader actively grips the book. The question remains, when will you activate 1912?